Hi there, I'm Tony Lee, and this is Hot Flasher, your daily menopause podcast that serves up fresh news, research, and wellness tips. I've built a daily news pipeline to find the latest on women's health and menopause research. Allow me to introduce my co-host Nikki, who handles the headlines. Take it away, Nikki.
Thanks, Tony. We've got a good one to close out the week. Okay, frozen shoulder. If you've had it, you know exactly what I'm describing. That slow building stiffness in your shoulder that eventually turns into genuine inability to move your arm through a normal range of motion. It's painful, it's stubborn, and it can take months or even years to fully resolve. Time magazine covered this week why frozen shoulder, the clinical name is adhesive capsulitis, is showing up in perimenopause conversations, and honestly, it should have been showing up a lot sooner. Here's the basic picture. Frozen shoulder disproportionately affects women, and it tends to cluster in the 40s and 50s. That overlap with perimenopause is not a coincidence. Estrogen receptors exist in joint tissue and tendons. As estrogen drops during the perimenopause transition, connective tissue changes, it becomes less pliable, more prone to inflammation, and apparently more susceptible to the kind of fibrosis that drives frozen shoulder. The shoulder joint is particularly vulnerable because of how it's structured, but the underlying mechanism is systemic. What frustrates me about this one is the diagnostic lag. A woman in her late 40s walks into a clinic with shoulder pain and stiffness. The workup is going to look at rotator cuff injury, bursitis, maybe arthritis. Perimenopause is probably not in the differential. And so she gets physical therapy for a condition that might actually respond, or at least be better understood, if the hormonal context were part of the picture from the start. That's a real gap, not just in knowledge, but in how we're trained to think about which bodies get which conditions and why. Now, frozen shoulder isn't something HRT is guaranteed to fix. The research doesn't go that far yet. But knowing that estrogen decline is likely part of the mechanism at least points you toward better conversations. If you've been dealing with shoulder stiffness that your PT can't fully explain, it's worth putting the timeline next to your perimenopause symptoms and seeing whether they track. Bring that to your doctor. It's a data point they might not have thought to collect. The same kind of connective tissue picture is probably why so many women in perimenopause report joint aches that feel different from anything they've experienced before, more generalized, more persistent, not tied to any obvious injury. The frozen shoulder story is a specific, dramatic version of something that's happening more quietly all over the body, which is worth knowing. All right. From joints to headaches. There's a narrative review just published in the NAMS journal. That's the Journal of the North American Menopause Society, looking at the intersection of migraines and sleep disturbances during perimenopause. And the core finding is something that will sound obvious once you hear it, but that clinical guidelines have largely failed to address. These two things feed each other. Poor sleep lowers your migraine threshold, meaning if you're not sleeping well, you're more vulnerable to a migraine the next day. And migraines, when they happen, wreck your sleep architecture. They fragment sleep, reduce REM, and make restorative sleep hard to get. So you have a loop. Bad sleep leads to more migraines, which lead to worse sleep, which leads to more migraines. And perimenopause is the context where both of these things get worse simultaneously, driven by the same hormonal fluctuations. The review makes the point that most clinical approaches treat these as separate problems. You see a neurologist for migraines. You see your GP or a sleep specialist for insomnia. Nobody is necessarily coordinating those two tracks, even though the evidence suggests they should be. The review calls for integrated management, which is a reasonable ask, and also the kind of ask that runs headlong into how fragmented care for perimenopausal women already is. Still, it's the right direction. If you're someone who tracks your migraines, and if you get them, you probably do, the practical move here is to add sleep quality to that log. Not just how many hours, but how rested you felt, whether you woke up repeatedly, whether the night before a migraine looks different from other nights. That kind of data is genuinely useful when you're talking to a doctor about what's triggering your headaches, and it might reveal a pattern that neither of you would have spotted otherwise. The kind of evidence your doctor would look at on a tool like open evidence, well-sourced, peer-reviewed, methodologically sound, supports this connection. It's not fringe theory. One more thing worth flagging from the review: hormone fluctuations themselves can be direct migraine triggers. The drop in estrogen in the days before a period, which happens more erratically in perimenopause, is a well-established migraine driver. This is part of why some women who've had migraines their whole lives find them getting worse during perimenopause, and why some women who rarely had them start getting them. It's not random. The hormonal context matters. Okay, last story for the week, and it's a satisfying one if you enjoy having your skepticism confirmed by data. A team of researchers just published a bibliometric analysis in the NAMS journal looking at 24 years, 2000 through 2024, of US dietary supplement research for menopause. Bibliometric analysis means they mapped the research landscape. How many studies, which ingredients, which institutions, how often findings got replicated. The picture they found is not flattering. The number of distinct supplement ingredients that have been studied for menopause symptoms is large. The number of those ingredients that have been studied more than once by independent teams in rigorous trials is much smaller. Research efforts are dispersed. Collaboration between research groups is limited. And perimenopause, as distinct from postmenopause, is notably underrepresented. Most of the studies that exist focus on postmenopausal women, which means the transition phase, when symptoms are often at their most chaotic, is exactly where the evidence is thinnest. This is a gap that the supplement industry has cheerfully filled. Walk into any health food store or scroll through any wellness influencers' affiliate links, and you'll find a robust, confident marketplace for menopause supplements. Black cohosh, evening primrose, ashwagandha, maca, DIM, magnesium glycinate, specifically marketed for hot flashes, sleep, mood. The confidence of the marketing is inversely proportional to the quality of the evidence behind it. That's not a conspiracy, it's just how this market works. Weak regulatory requirements for supplements mean you don't have to prove efficacy before you make the claim. The researchers behind this analysis frame the evidence gap as an opportunity, which is the polite scientific way of saying we have almost nothing solid and we need to do better. I'd put it more directly: 24 years of research and we still don't have reliable, replicated answers for most of what's on the shelf. That's a long time to be telling women that these products will help without being able to back it up. None of this means every supplement is useless. Magnesium, for example, has decent general evidence for sleep, and there's plausible mechanism for why it might help perimenopausal women specifically. But plausible mechanism and some evidence is very different from proven to work for your hot flashes, which is the register most supplement marketing operates in. Knowing that distinction and holding it when you're standing in the supplement aisle, feeling desperate for something to help. That's the actual takeaway from 24 years of underpowered research. Thanks so much for spending the week with us. If Hot Flasher has been useful to you, hit subscribe wherever you listen. It really does help the show reach more women who need it. Have a great weekend and I'll see you Monday. And
that's our week. Thanks for listening to Hot Flasher. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.